Hands where I can see them.
Hands where I can see
Now.
them! Now!
The command came sharp and loud, cutting through the rain like a blade. Simone's hand froze halfway to her pocket. Two officers emerged, weapons drawn, flashlight beams converging on her face with blinding intensity. Her heart rate spiked, but her expression remained controlled. Years of military training kicked in automatically. Assess, calculate, survive. It was a Thursday night. Rain hammered the concrete in sharp, relentless bursts. The parking garage beneath the Pentagon Annex was nearly empty at 11:30, just flickering fluorescent lights casting long shadows across oil-stained floors. Brigadier General Simone Harper's heels echoed against the pavement as she walked toward her silver sedan, her mind still processing the classified briefings she just left. Strategic deployments in the Pacific, resource allocations, chain of command protocols, the usual weight of decisions that affected thousands of lives. She reached for her car keys, her leather laptop bag slung over one shoulder, when she heard it, the screech of tires, too fast, too aggressive for a secure government facility. Two squad cars, Alexandria Police Department markings visible even in the dim light, lurched around the corner and skidded to a halt 20 feet from where she stood. 4 doors flew open simultaneously. "I said hands up!" The older officer, white, probably mid-40s with a weathered face and cold eyes, moved closer. His nameplate read Caldwell. "I'm reaching for my identification," she said clearly, her voice steady despite the adrenaline flooding her system. "I'm a U.S. Army officer stationed at this facility. We've had reports of suspicious activity, vehicle tampering. You match the description." Simone's mind raced. Description of what? She'd been in a classified briefing for 3 hours with 24 other senior officials. She slowly raised both hands, palms open, making sure they could see she held nothing but her car keys. "Officer, there's been a mistake. My name is Brigadier General Simone Harper, United States Army. My credentials are in my jacket pocket. I have authorization to be here." The second officer, younger, black, maybe late 20s, shifted uncomfortably. His nameplate read Hill. He glanced at his partner, then back at Simone, uncertainty flickering across his features. But Caldwell wasn't listening. He was already moving forward, holstering his weapon and pulling out handcuffs. "Turn around. Hands behind your back." "Officer Caldwell," Simone said, her tone sharpening slightly, "I'm ordering you to check my identification before you do something we'll all regret. My ID is in my right inside jacket pocket. My military credentials are in my wallet. Turn around now or I will take you down. If your heart is racing right now, if you're feeling that mix of anger and hope, you're not alone. Smash that like button to stand with General Harper. Subscribe because stories like this need to be told. And share this video with someone who needs to understand what bias really looks like." The rain intensified, plastering her uniform jacket against her shoulders. Simone had faced hostile forces in 3 combat zones. She'd negotiated with warlords, commanded battalions, briefed presidents. But standing in this parking garage with an American police officer treating her like a criminal, she felt something she rarely allowed herself to feel. Genuine fear. Not of physical harm, though that was possible. Fear of what this moment represented. Fear of how easily authority could be stripped away when someone refused to see past the color of her skin. She turned slowly, placing her hands behind her back. The cold metal of the handcuffs bit into her wrist with practiced efficiency. Too tight. Deliberately too tight. Her laptop bag slipped from her shoulder and hit the wet concrete with a heavy thud. Inside were classified documents, encrypted drives, materials that required security clearances most people would never obtain. "Officer Hill," she said, directing her words to the younger man, "you're making a serious mistake. I need you to look at my identification. Right now." Hill stepped forward hesitantly, but Caldwell blocked him with an outstretched arm. "She's stalling." Probably ditched whatever she stole. "Marcus, check the vehicle. I'll process her." Simone felt Caldwell's hand on her shoulder, pushing her toward the squad car. Every instinct screamed to resist, to demand her rights, to invoke the authority she'd earned through decades of service. But she also knew the statistics. She knew what happened to people, especially black people, who resisted police officers, even when those officers were catastrophically wrong. "I'm complying fully with your orders," she said clearly, her voice carrying across the garage. She knew there were cameras. She knew this facility was monitored. She just had to survive long enough for someone to notice. "But you need to understand that I am a flag officer in the United States military, and you are currently detaining me illegally on a secure government installation." Caldwell laughed, a harsh sound without humor. "Right, and I'm the Secretary of Defense. Lady, I've heard every story. Save it for booking." Officer Hill was searching her vehicle now, his flashlight beam sweeping across the interior. He'd find nothing, of course. Registration in her name, military parking permit, maybe a coffee cup in the holder and a phone charger. But Simone knew that wasn't the point. The point was that these men had already decided who she was the moment they saw her. A black woman in a parking garage late at night. And their assumptions filled in the rest. The rain ran down her face, mixing with the cold sweat of controlled panic. Simone's mind worked systematically through her options. Protocol dictated she should have already been read her rights if this was an actual arrest. She hadn't been. Protocol also dictated that on a secure military installation, civilian police needed specific authorization and coordination with military security. They clearly didn't have it, or they'd know exactly who she was. Her smartwatch vibrated against her wrist, still accessible despite the handcuffs. She'd worn it to track her vitals during her morning workout, but right now it represented something more valuable. A direct link to her office, to Pentagon security, to people who would believe her. The watch face was pressed against her palm, and she carefully, methodically, began pressing the emergency alert sequence. 3 short presses, pause, 2 long presses. Her location would ping immediately to her aide, to Pentagon security operations, to the emergency response team. Someone would come. She just had to buy time. Caldwell pushed her against the squad car, his hand heavy on her back. The cold metal of the hood pressed against her cheek, rain streaming across the surface in rivulets. Simone kept her breathing controlled, measured. In, out, in, out. She'd been trained for prisoner of war scenarios, for hostile interrogations, for maintaining composure under extreme duress. This was different, though. This was home. This was America. This was supposed to be safe. "Empty your pockets," Caldwell ordered. "Officer, I cannot empty my pockets." "You've handcuffed me." Her voice remained calm, almost detached, as if she were briefing junior officers on procedure rather than standing in the rain being treated like a suspect. "If you remove the restraints, I'll show you my identification. If you check with Pentagon security, they'll confirm my identity in less than 2 minutes. I'm not calling anybody until I know what we're dealing with here," Caldwell said, reaching into her jacket pocket himself. He pulled out her military ID card, the one with her rank, her clearance level, her photo in dress uniform. He barely glanced at it before shoving it back in her pocket. "Fake IDs are a dime a dozen. Nice try, though. Army General." He said the last 2 words with open mockery. Officer Hill returned from searching the vehicle, his expression troubled. "Sir, there's nothing in the car. Registration shows it belongs to a Simone L. Harper, address in Alexandria. Military parking permit, valid through December. Everything checks out." Caldwell waved him off dismissively. "So she's got good papers." Doesn't mean anything. The call said African American female, late 30s to mid 40s, professional clothing, tampering with vehicles in this section. She's right here, right time, right place. Simone's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Late 30s to mid 40s, professional clothing. That description could fit thousands of women who worked in this complex, but somehow it had narrowed down to her, the only black woman walking to her car at this hour. The profiling was so transparent, it would have been laughable if it weren't so dangerous. What vehicles was I allegedly tampering with? She asked. Specifically, which ones? Don't get smart with me, Caldwell snapped. It's not about being smart, officer. It's about facts. I was in a classified briefing from 8:15 until 11:20 tonight. 26 witnesses, including the Deputy Secretary of Defense and the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. I walked directly from that briefing to my vehicle. I haven't touched any other car. If you contact the security office, they can provide you with entry logs, surveillance footage, and sworn statements from multiple flag officers who can account for my whereabouts. Hill shifted his weight uncomfortably. Maybe we should check with Marcus. I've been doing this job for 22 years. I know a con artist when I see one. Caldwell grabbed Simone's arm, preparing to lead her to the squad car. We're taking her in. Let the detectives sort it out downtown. That's when Simone heard the sound that changed everything. The distinctive rumble of heavy vehicles approaching fast. Not civilian cars. Military vehicles. 2 black SUVs with government plates swept into the garage, their headlights cutting through the rain like searchlights. They stopped in a tactical formation, blocking both exits, and 6 figures emerged wearing dark suits and Department of Defense security badges. The lead agent, a tall white man with steel gray hair and the bearing of someone who'd spent decades in intelligence work, walked directly toward the scene with purposeful strides. His credentials were already out, held high enough for the officers to see clearly. Agent Colin Price, Department of Defense Security Service. Release that officer immediately. Caldwell's grip on Simone's arm loosened slightly, but he didn't remove the handcuffs. This is Alexandria PD business. We're conducting an investigation. You're detaining a flag officer on a secure military installation without authorization, without coordination with installation security, and without following basic identification protocols. Price's voice carried the flat, dangerous quality of someone who didn't need to raise his volume to convey authority. I'm not asking, Officer Caldwell. Remove the restraints from Brigadier General Harper right now, or I will place both you and Officer Hill under arrest for interference with military operations and unlawful detention of a commissioned officer. The parking garage fell silent except for the rain and the idling engines. Simone felt the tension in Caldwell's hand, the moment of resistance, the calculation happening behind his eyes. Could he push back? Should he? The answer was written in the semicircle of DOD agents now surrounding them, hands resting casually near their sidearms, expressions neutral but watchful. Hill moved first. Sir, I'll remove the restraints. His voice was quiet, almost apologetic. He stepped forward with the key, and Simone felt the pressure release from her wrists. The handcuffs came away, leaving angry red marks on her dark skin. She rubbed her wrists slowly, methodically, her expression still carefully controlled. General Harper, Price said, his tone shifting to something approaching respect. Are you injured? Do you require medical attention? I'm fine, Agent Price. Simone's voice was steady, but something in it had changed. The control was still there, but underneath it, there was steel. Though I will need documentation of this incident, complete documentation, every surveillance camera in this garage, every dispatch call, every radio communication, I want it all. Price nodded once. Already being compiled, ma'am. We'll have it to you within the hour. Simone turned to face Caldwell and Hill directly. The younger officer couldn't meet her eyes. The older one stared back defiantly, his jaw set, clearly still believing he'd done nothing wrong. She let the silence stretch for 3 long heartbeats before she spoke. Officer Caldwell, Officer Hill, I want you to understand something very clearly. I've served this country for 27 years. I've commanded soldiers in combat zones. I've advised presidents. I've lost friends to enemy fire and trained thousands of young people to defend American values. Tonight, I followed every lawful order you gave me, even though you had no legal authority to detain me. I complied because I know what happens when black people don't comply with police, even when those police are completely, catastrophically wrong. Her voice never rose, never wavered, but every word landed with precision. You didn't see a general tonight. You didn't see a decorated officer. You didn't see someone who's given her entire adult life to service. You saw a black woman in a parking garage, and you filled in the rest with your assumptions, and those assumptions nearly cost you everything. Caldwell opened his mouth to respond, but Price cut him off. Officers, you need to leave this installation immediately. Your supervisors have already been notified. You'll be contacted regarding the investigation into this incident within 24 hours. I strongly suggest you cooperate fully. Hill was already moving toward his squad car, his face ashen. Caldwell hesitated, something between anger and fear playing across his features, before finally following. If you're feeling something right now, anger, frustration, recognition, you're not alone. Hit that like button if this story is resonating with you, and stick around because what happens next will surprise you. Subscribe so you don't miss out on how one phone call changes everything for these officers. The squad cars pulled away slowly, their red tail lights disappearing into the rain-soaked night. Simone stood perfectly still, watching them go, her hands still rubbing absently at her wrists where the handcuffs had bitten into her skin. Agent Price approached carefully, respectfully maintaining distance, waiting for her signal. General, I apologize for the delay in our response. Your emergency alert came through at 11:34. We mobilized immediately, but traffic... You got here, Agent Price. That's what matters. Simone picked up her laptop bag from the wet concrete, inspecting it for damage. The leather was soaked, but the contents seemed intact. Classified materials secure. Her phone dry. Her dignity she'd have to assess later in private, where no one could see the cracks starting to form in her carefully maintained composure. She'd spent 27 years building a career in an institution that hadn't always wanted women like her. Simone had been 8 years old when she first saw a news report about Selma, the city she was born in, the place where her grandmother had marched across the Edmund Pettus Bridge in 1965. Her grandmother had told her stories about dogs and fire hoses, about peaceful protesters being beaten, about fighting for the simple right to be seen as human. And her grandmother had said, "Baby girl, you're going to do something they can't ignore. You're going to be so excellent they'll have no choice but to see you." Simone had believed it. She joined ROTC at Alabama State University, graduated top of her class. She'd been commissioned as a second lieutenant and spent the next 2 decades proving herself in a military that was slowly, grudgingly making space for black women in leadership. Company commander in Germany, battalion executive officer in Afghanistan, strategic planning roles at the Pentagon. Every promotion earned twice over because excellence wasn't enough. She had to be undeniable. And tonight, in a parking garage less than 2 miles from the White House, 2 police officers from the Alexandria Police Department had looked at her and seen nothing but a suspect. Agent Price was still talking, something about investigation protocols and official statements. But Simone's mind had drifted to a different time, a different place. She was 7 years old again, sitting in her grandmother's kitchen in Selma, watching the woman who'd raised her press a church dress, preparing for Sunday service. The iron hissed against the fabric, steam rising in small clouds. "Why do we have to dress so nice for church, Grandma?" young Simone had asked. Her grandmother had looked at her with those deep brown eyes, that had seen too much, survived too much. Because baby, when you're black in America, you have to be twice as good to get half as fair. You have to be beyond reproach. You dress nice, you speak well, you work harder than anyone else. And maybe they'll see past the color of your skin and see your value. Simone had internalized that lesson. She'd lived it every single day. Impeccable uniform, perfect posture, flawless performance reviews. She'd made herself undeniable through sheer excellence. And still, tonight, it hadn't mattered. General Harper? Price's voice pulled her back to the present. Are you sure you're all right? Yes. The word came out automatically, the response of someone trained to never show weakness. Then more honestly, no. But I will be. Price nodded, understanding in his expression. He'd probably seen this before. The aftermath of injustice, the way people held themselves together through crisis and only broke once the danger passed. I'll have an agent escort you home. You shouldn't drive tonight. Simone wanted to argue, to insist she was fine, to maintain the image of the unshakable officer. But her hands were trembling now, adrenaline crash setting in, and she was suddenly overwhelmingly tired. Thank you. I'd appreciate that. The drive to her Alexandria townhouse took 20 minutes. Agent Morrison, a quiet woman in her 30s, handled the vehicle with professional efficiency and asked no questions. Simone was grateful for the silence. She stared out the window at the rain-slicked streets, the late-night traffic, the ordinary world continuing as if nothing extraordinary had just happened. Somewhere in that city, Caldwell and Hill were probably writing their incident reports, probably spinning the encounter to justify their actions, probably still believing they'd done nothing wrong. Her phone buzzed. Messages were flooding in. Pentagon security, her aide, colleagues who'd somehow already heard. News traveled fast in military circles. She ignored them all except one. From Lieutenant General Marcus Washington, her mentor and friend for 15 years. I heard. Are you okay? Call me when you're ready. She texted back. I'm okay. Tomorrow. But she wasn't okay. She wouldn't be okay for a while.
At home, Simone stood in her bathroom. Uniform jacket hung carefully on its hanger and examined the marks on her wrists under the bright vanity lights. Red, angry welts where the cuffs had been deliberately over-tightened. They'd fade in a day or two, leave no permanent physical scars. The other kind would take longer. She'd been in firefights where she'd maintained perfect composure. She'd delivered death notifications to families of fallen soldiers without breaking down. She'd stood in the Situation Room during crisis after crisis, offering calm, strategic counsel while the world seemed to be ending. But standing here, alone in her bathroom at midnight, looking at the evidence of her own country's police treating her like a criminal, something inside her cracked just slightly. She pressed her palms flat against the cool marble countertop and breathed. In, out, in, out. The techniques she'd taught junior officers for managing combat stress. Center yourself. Focus on what you can control. Process the trauma later, survive the moment now. Except the moment was over, and now came the processing. Her phone rang. Lieutenant General Washington, unable to wait until tomorrow after all. She answered. Simone, talk to me. And for the first time that night, with someone she trusted, someone who understood, she let some of the control slip. Marcus, I did everything right. I was calm. I was compliant. I identified myself clearly. And it didn't matter. He looked at me and saw. Her voice caught slightly. He saw what he expected to see, and nothing I said could change it. I know. Washington's voice was heavy with understanding that came from lived experience. He was a black man who'd risen to 3-star rank in an institution that hadn't made it easy. I know, Simone. And I'm sorry you had to go through that. What happens now? Now we make sure it matters. We make sure those officers face consequences. We make sure this incident becomes part of the record. Simone closed her eyes, gathering herself. Washington was right. She could let this break her, or she could let it fuel something larger. Every fight her grandmother had fought, Every barrier she'd broken in her own career, it all led to moments like this where she had to decide what kind of leader she would be. "All right," she said finally, her voice regaining its characteristic steadiness. "Let's make it count."
By morning, Agent Price had delivered a comprehensive report, full surveillance footage from 6 different cameras, dispatch records showing the vague, racially coded description that had triggered the response, radio communications proving that Caldwell had been advised to contact Pentagon security before approaching anyone on the installation and had ignored that instruction. The evidence was damning, indisputable, and exactly what Simone needed. She sat at her kitchen table with her coffee, still in her exercise clothes from a 5 a.m. run she'd forced herself to complete because routine mattered, normalcy mattered, not letting fear change her life mattered. The report laid out the timeline with brutal clarity. The initial call had come from an anonymous tip. Suspicious black female, professional attire, possibly tampering with vehicles. No specific vehicle identified, no actual crime observed. Just suspicion wrapped in a description that could have fit dozens of women in that complex on any given night. Pentagon security had logged her entry at 8:12 p.m. for the classified briefing. They had footage of her entering the conference room, staying there for 3 hours and 8 minutes, then walking directly to her vehicle. No detours, no stops, no interaction with any other cars. The timeline made it physically impossible for her to have done what she'd been accused of. But Caldwell had never checked the timeline. He'd never made the call. He'd seen a black woman, received a racially coded tip, and decided that was enough. Officer Hill's body camera footage was perhaps the most revealing. The video showed Simone's calm compliance, her clear identification, her repeated request for them to verify her credentials. It showed Caldwell's dismissiveness, his mockery when she stated her rank, his deliberate refusal to follow basic protocol. It also showed something else. Hill's hesitation, his uncertainty, his multiple attempts to suggest they verify her identity before proceeding, and Caldwell overriding him every time. Within 48 hours, Alexandria Police Department had placed both officers on administrative leave. The decision came from the chief himself, who'd personally called Simone to apologize and promise a thorough investigation. She'd been professional on the call, thanked him for his prompt response, and said nothing about what she actually thought. That apologies meant nothing without structural change. That administrative leave was just the beginning of what needed to happen. The media got hold of the story on day 3. Not from Simone, she'd said nothing publicly, but from someone inside Alexandria PD who'd seen the body camera footage and couldn't stay quiet. The headlines wrote themselves. Army general detained by police despite showing credentials. Black female officer handcuffed at Pentagon complex. When a star isn't enough, general shares experience with racial profiling. Simone's phone became unusable, flooded with interview requests from everyone from local news to national networks to international outlets. Her voicemail filled with messages from civil rights organizations, veterans groups, congressional staffers. Everyone wanted a statement. Everyone wanted her anger, her pain, her story served up in digestible sound bites for their audiences. She gave them nothing. Not yet. That evening, Simone drafted a statement, not a press release written by public affairs officers, not a carefully sanitized message approved by lawyers. Her words, her truth, her terms. She posted it on her professional social media account at 9 p.m. on a Thursday, exactly 1 week after the incident. My name is Brigadier General Simone Harper. Last Thursday night, I was detained, handcuffed, and treated as a criminal suspect while walking to my car after a classified briefing at a secure military installation. I was calm. I was compliant. I clearly identified myself and offered my credentials multiple times. None of it mattered because the officers involved had already decided who I was based on my appearance. I want to be clear about something. I am not special. I am not unique. What happened to me happens to Black Americans every single day. The only difference is that I had the rank, the resources, and the platform to demand accountability. Most people don't. This isn't about two officers making a mistake. This is about systemic assumptions that see black skin and fill in threat before gathering any actual facts. It's about how implicit bias can turn a routine interaction into a traumatic experience. It's about who gets the benefit of the doubt and who has to prove their humanity repeatedly, even when wearing the uniform of their country. I've spent my entire career serving an institution I love, an institution that represents American values. But American values mean nothing if they don't apply equally to all Americans.
If a flag officer can be dismissed and detained despite clear identification, what happens to people without rank, without resources, without cameras watching? If her words are hitting home, share this video with someone who needs to hear this message. Drop a comment below about how we can hold systems accountable. Your voice matters in this conversation. I'm calling for comprehensive policy reform, mandatory coordination with installation security before any civilian police action on military property, rigorous implicit bias training with third-party accountability, and transparent investigation processes when things go wrong. This isn't about punishment. It's about preventing the next person from experiencing what I did. To the young officers, the cadets, the people who look like me and wonder if their service will ever be enough. It is enough. You are enough. Don't let anyone's inability to see your worth diminish what you bring to this profession. And to everyone else, I'll say this. Your title may carry weight, but your integrity, your presence, your humanity matter even more. How will you respond when no one sees you for who you are? I chose compliance and documentation. I survived to tell this story. Not everyone does. This isn't just General Harper's story. It's happening to people in your community right now. If you believe dignity matters regardless of rank or race, hit that subscribe button. Like this video to push it to more people who need to see it. And please, share it with your family, your friends, anyone who says, just comply and nothing bad will happen. Show them what compliance looks like when bias is in charge. The statement went viral within hours. Thousands of shares, millions of views, comment sections filled with people sharing their own stories of profiling, of being dismissed, of having to prove themselves repeatedly. News outlets picked it up. Civil rights leaders praised it. Some criticized her for going public. Simone didn't respond to any of it. She'd said what needed to be said. The Alexandria Police Department's internal investigation moved faster than anyone expected. Maybe it was the public pressure. Maybe it was the undeniable evidence. Maybe it was the fact that detaining a flag officer on a military installation had created jurisdictional nightmares that nobody wanted to deal with. Whatever the reason, 2 weeks after the incident, the department announced its findings in a press conference that Simone watched from her office. The police chief, a gray-haired man who looked like he hadn't slept in days, stood before a wall of cameras and reporters. After a thorough investigation into the incident involving Brigadier General Simone Harper, we have determined that Officers Ryan Caldwell and Marcus Hill violated multiple department policies. Officer Caldwell failed to follow proper identification verification protocols, failed to coordinate with Pentagon security as required when operating on federal property, and used excessive restraint on a compliant subject. His actions demonstrated a pattern of bias and disregard for established procedures. The chief paused, visibly uncomfortable with what he had to say next. Officer Caldwell is hereby recommended for immediate termination. Officer Hill, while showing hesitation and attempting to suggest proper protocol, ultimately failed to intervene when his partner violated policy. He will receive a formal reprimand, mandatory retraining, and will be placed on probationary status for 12 months. But the chief wasn't finished. Furthermore, the Alexandria Police Department is implementing immediate policy changes. Effective immediately, all officers will undergo enhanced training on implicit bias, de-escalation, and proper identification protocols. We are establishing a civilian oversight board to review all use of force incidents and complaints of misconduct. We are also implementing mandatory coordination with federal security when operating on government installations. These changes are necessary, overdue, and non-negotiable. Simone watched the press conference with Lieutenant General Washington in her office. When it ended, she felt something she hadn't felt in 2 weeks. a small measure of satisfaction. Not justice exactly. Justice would have been never being handcuffed in the first place. But accountability, that was something. It's a start, Washington said quietly. It's more than a start, Simone replied. It's policy change. It's enforceable. It means the next person might have a different experience. Right now, you have a choice. You can scroll past and forget this happened, or you can take 3 seconds to make a difference. Like this video to show YouTube this story matters. Subscribe so you never miss when we expose injustice. Share it because someone in your life, maybe someone you love, will face this same situation someday. Be the reason they see this lesson. 2 days after the announcement, Officer Ryan Caldwell resigned before his termination hearing could take place. He posted a statement on social media claiming he was a victim of political correctness, that he'd followed his training, that he'd done nothing wrong. The statement was quickly deleted after backlash from his own colleagues, but screenshots circulated, showing exactly the kind of officer he was. Someone who couldn't accept accountability even when the evidence was overwhelming. Officer Marcus Hill stayed with the department. He said nothing publicly, accepted his reprimand without complaint, and reportedly requested transfer to a community policing unit where he could work on rebuilding trust. Simone heard through unofficial channels that Hill had privately apologized, saying he should have done more, should have stood up to his partner, should have trusted his instincts. She appreciated the sentiment, even if it came too late.
This is what accountability looks like. If you believe in demanding better from the systems that are supposed to protect us, hit that subscribe button. We need to keep telling these stories, keep demanding change. More stories like this are coming. Don't miss them. 3 months later, Simone stood before a room of officer candidates at West Point, invited to speak about leadership and integrity. She looked out at the faces, young, diverse, eager, some of them probably wondering if they'd face what she'd faced. She told them the story, not to discourage them, but to prepare them for the reality that excellence wasn't always enough, that the uniform didn't always protect you, that they'd have to be strong in ways they shouldn't have to be. But here's what I learned, she told them, her voice carrying to the back of the auditorium. Dignity isn't given to you by others. It's something you maintain regardless of how you're treated. I kept my composure that night, not because those officers deserved it, but because I deserved it. I refused to give them the reaction they expected. And in doing so, I took back some of the power they tried to take from me. She paused, letting her words settle over the room. You'll face injustice. Some of you already have. When it happens, remember this. How you respond defines you more than what was done to you. Document it. Report it. Demand accountability. But don't let it steal your purpose or your pride. You've earned your place here. You've earned your right to serve. Don't ever let anyone convince you otherwise. The cadets rose in a standing ovation. Some had tears in their eyes. Others stood rigid at attention, processing what she'd shared. Simone stood there, accepting their recognition, and felt something shift inside her. The anger was still there. It might always be there, but alongside it was purpose. She turned her trauma into testimony, her pain into policy change, her private humiliation into public accountability. After the speech, a young black woman in cadet uniform approached hesitantly. Ma'am, can I ask you something? Of course. How do you keep going, knowing that even when you do everything right, it might not matter? Simone looked at this young woman, seeing herself 25 years ago, full of determination and hope and the naive belief that excellence would always be enough. She could have lied, could have offered empty reassurances, could have pretended the path would be easy. Instead, she told the truth. You keep going because someone who looks like you is watching. You keep going because every barrier you break makes it easier for the person behind you. You keep going because giving up means they win, and I refuse to give anyone that power over my life. It won't always be fair. It won't always be easy, but it will always be worth it. The cadet nodded, squaring her shoulders. Thank you, ma'am. I needed to hear that. That night, alone in her quarters, Simone looked at the photo on her desk. Her grandmother, standing on the Edmund Pettus Bridge during the 50th anniversary commemoration. The old woman was gone now, but Simone could still hear her voice. Be so excellent they can't ignore you. She'd done that. And when excellence hadn't been enough, she demanded they see her anyway. She picked up her phone and recorded one final message, posting it as a follow-up to her original statement. To everyone who shared their stories, who found their voice through mine, thank you. To the young people watching, wondering if it's worth it to keep fighting, it is. And to those who still don't understand why this matters, I'll say simply, justice isn't just about punishing wrong. It's about preventing it from happening again. We're not done yet, but we're moving forward. The responses flooded in immediately. Thousands of comments from people who'd experienced similar treatment, from young officers inspired by her courage, from parents teaching their children about resilience, from strangers who'd never worn a uniform but understood what it meant to be judged before being seen. One comment stuck with her from a retired Marine colonel. You could have stayed silent. You could have let it go. Instead, you used your platform to create change. That's leadership, General. That's what service looks like. Simone read it twice, then closed her phone. She'd never wanted to be the face of this fight. She'd never wanted to be the story that sparked national conversation about bias in policing. But sometimes leadership meant accepting the roles you didn't choose, fighting battles you didn't start, and using whatever platform you had to make things better for those who came after you. The marks on her wrists had faded. The physical evidence of that night was gone. But the lesson remained, carved into her understanding of what it meant to serve in a country, still learning to see all its citizens equally. She was a brigadier general, a flag officer, a leader of soldiers. And she was a black woman who'd been handcuffed in a parking garage because two officers couldn't see past her skin. Both things were true. Both things mattered. And both things would shape how she led, how she taught, how she continued to serve. She thought about Officer Caldwell, probably bitter and angry, convinced he'd done nothing wrong. She thought about Officer Hill, hopefully learning, growing, becoming the officer he should have been that night. She thought about the policies that would change, the training that would improve, the next black woman who might walk to her car without being stopped. Progress was slow, imperfect, and often painful, but it was progress, and she played her part in making it happen. General Harper turned her pain into policy change, her trauma into a teaching moment. You can turn your outrage into action right now. If this story moved you, if it made you think differently, if it inspired you to demand better, hit that subscribe button right now. Share this video with your family, your friends, your community. Leave a comment about your own experiences or what you think needs to change. These conversations matter. Hit that like button. It's free, but it's powerful.